Hey everyone, today's episode of The Jai Dave Show is brought to you by the Life Force Academy, the ultimate home Kundalini Yoga experience. Whether you're brand new to Kundalini Yoga, never tried it before, or perhaps you're a seasoned practitioner, long-time practitioner, the Life Force Academy is an amazing experience, whether you want to do one of our 40-day challenges, or you want to use our power practices for waking up early in the morning to get energized, or have a deep meditation for a restful sleep. There is something for everyone in the Life Force Academy. You can take full yoga classes that not only will give you the powerful exercises and the transporting meditations of Kundalini Yoga, but will take you deep into the teachings and the streams of consciousness that are inspiring, uplifting, and real. Genuine stuff, non-dogmatic, not uptight, not rigid, but real and for human beings who wish to live happy, wish to live prosperous, wish to live with a clear mind, filled with real genuine love, happiness. Check out the Life Force Academy. As a listener of this podcast, all you have to do is go to lifeforce.yoga, type that into your browser, lifeforce.yoga, and you will get a 14-day trial for just $1. Check out the Life Force Academy by going to lifeforce.yoga. And now for today's episode with Tommy Rosen and Kia Miller. Hey there, friends. Today's episode of this podcast is my interview with my dear friends Tommy Rosen and Kia Miller. Many of you I know are familiar with Tommy and Kia, husband and wife, both very successful yoga teachers. More importantly, amazing people, beautiful people, inspiring, huge hearts. And they're two people I consider great friends. And, you know, one of the reasons, as I mentioned, that I want to do this podcast is because I just wanted to talk to people that I genuinely want to talk about. But maybe without a podcast, I wouldn't carve out the time, or we wouldn't carve out the time to actually sit down and talk about certain things. And especially not record them. But in this case, we did. And we had this conversation at Satnam Fest in Joshua Tree, California. And it was a great conversation. I don't remember everything we talked about, but I remember feeling inspired and feeling blissful and really, really enjoyed talking with Tommy and Kia, as I always do every time I see them. Tommy and Kia represent the other aspect of what I wanted this podcast to be all about, and that's hearing from people who have really devoted their life to concentrating their energy in a single direction. So for instance, in Tommy's case, he has a business called Recovery 2.0. So he works in the field of recovery. However, he's also a great yogi. And so while they use many of the very wonderful traditional methodologies and philosophies in the field of recovery, he also uses yogic philosophy and yogic teachings and yogic practices, and it's really innovative and it's really inspiring. I'm personally inspired in it. In fact, I'm a member personally of Recovery 2.0, because when someone really taps the essence of their field, then they're really just tapping the essence of life. And that's what happens when you concentrate your energy in a single direction, like Tommy and Kia have done, using their respective fields of recovery and yoga. And they are really inspiring people to talk to. And I would encourage you to check out Recovery 2.0. Even if you yourself aren't struggling with addiction in the traditional sense of what that means. We all, this day and age, have somebody close to us. Addiction's an epidemic in the modern world, and it's something we all need to be paying attention to. And when you learn from Tommy, and you start to learn that actually all of us have our struggle with addiction at some level, and that's actually what yoga is all about, is gaining liberation from that. Yoga practice, yogic teachings, yogic lifestyle. Yogic life is the human life, when the human life is focused on consciousness, is focused on becoming filled with love, energy. that's what this conversation's all about. So Google Recovery 2.0. I really want you to do that. I really want you to check that out, Recovery 2.0. And then Kia, go to her website, kiamiller.com. She's an amazing, beautiful person, great, really popular yoga teacher. They're based out of the LA area, but they travel all over the world. Kia does teacher trainings. They do them in the United States, all over. They do their trainings in India. They do really, really great work. So kiamiller.com, Recovery 2.0. Those are the two websites to check out. And without further ado, please enjoy this conversation with Tommy Rosen and Kia Miller. I'm happy we're doing this because I don't know that we would have carved out the time to talk for an hour. So,
right?
If we weren't doing this,
exactly.
That's one of the things I like about this podcasting.
Yeah.
And both of you have. I've been finding inspiration from both of you, and just watching you from the. Watching what you're doing, and occasionally, getting to connect like this. But every time I see anything that you guys are doing, I feel inspired and resonating with it. And the last year or two, I've been learning more about what you're doing, and dropped into your class last night and loved it. Dropped into your class a little bit today, and both of...
I saw you out there.
You have Kia, and Kia has one of the same superpowers Simrat has. And that is the smile. She has this smile. The Simrat has this too. I don't have it. Simrat has this smile that, like, when she does, it's like it penetrates like so great. And I noticed when you were teaching today, and I was in there. That was one of the first thing. It was like boom, this beautiful smile and presence and radiance and more than anything, like just genuine people, And sometimes. That can be rare to find, and I think, I want to know what you guys think. Do you think it's almost more difficult to find genuine people in the yoga community than outside of the yoga community? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
I think in the yoga community, you find people who have committed to practice or committed to do certain things that they feel will bring them to a better place. So if you believe that, generally speaking, people in the yoga community have agreed to themselves at least to do that, then you can count on people at the very least experiencing consciously their own humanity, or I could say their own flawed humanity. Because once you adopt an honest approach to life, you're going to start to see your stuff. It's not that your stuff stops coming. So out in the world, we could say, well, gosh, there seem so many people who are not genuine. In the yoga scene, you might find some people who are not yet genuine, but they're headed there by virtue of this pact that they've made, this intention that they have,
and working so hard on it sometimes that it like really convolutes the whole thing, and where it comes off is like just very naturally, organically. It's not a critique. It's just, I think that part of the natural path is like you're trying too hard for a period of time, but it's not ultimately too hard. It's just it's clumsy at first.
One of our teachers and dear friends in India, Anand Mehrotra, he says it so beautifully that when you first step onto the path of yoga, there's such an exponential growth that happens. That is what is perhaps so attractive. And then there's a natural plateau. But you've had this exponential growth. Now you've learned all the spiritual lingo. And now you're plateauing, and maybe you're not sustaining the kind of practices that may keep you more alert. So now, even though you have had a growth, you have all this spiritual lingo now to cover up the unconscious behaviors that you're still using. And so I think that's what a lot of us encounter within ourselves at the different stages of the journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that plateau seems like it can last a long time, or never ending, or try again next lifetime type thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of the great misconceptions people have about people who practice yoga, or what they project perhaps onto their yoga teacher. Is like, oh, well, you're a yoga teacher. You're beyond stress now. You're beyond anger now. Your behavior is somehow impeccable now, and nothing could be further from the truth. Actually, we're a yoga teacher because we need the path of yoga each day so as not to return to those behaviors. Or when we do return to those behaviors, we catch it more quickly than we used to and can clean it up more quickly than we used to.
Right.
But I've heard the most incredible things from students. Oh my God, Tommy, you seem a little stressed today. I didn't know you experienced that anymore.
They caught you. Busted, dude.
Right. I keep thinking someone needs to do the YouTube of the stressed out yoga teacher, and really, really show that.
Right.
You don't see that too often.
Right.
But it's there.
Yeah, it is there. But I like how you said that. You catch it, your awareness catches it a little more quickly. And then over time, it is there, but is there in a different way, it's not as, how would you say it? It's not as kind of gripped, to where it's less of a part of you and more that something that is moving through you. Yes. I think that's important.
What's exciting to me right now is just how many people in the greater yoga community are getting turned on to meditation, mindfulness practices, and a lot of people obviously being turned on to Kundalini yoga that weren't before.
Yeah.
And so I feel like in the collective consciousness level within the greater yoga community, there's this understanding that they really need meditation. Because they're stressed out, or life becomes unmanageable, or their online commitments become unmanageable. Right. And people are recognizing, there's this thing called meditation that everybody talks about as the solution. I've got to go to it. I mean, there's these studios in Los Angeles now, meditation classes, 70 plus people showing up to do some kind of mindfulness or guided meditation practice. And obviously we see an increase in people coming to Kundalini yoga as well, with that same understanding that there's something needed.
You guys about that, because you two are both connected to the larger yoga community more so than I am, and I think more so than maybe more so than any of the other Kundalini yoga teachers. You teach also Vinyasa Hatha yoga, and you have your whole thing. So what is your impression about? I guess that's kind of what you were just saying. But in terms of people's perception of Kundalini yoga, how do you think that? It seems like it has changed a little bit in even in the last year or so, huh? It's getting more popular? Perhaps it's hit some sort of point to where people are ready for it? What do you think is going on with that?
I think it is. And even, I come from the fashion world, and even on that very surface level of fashion, it's become the thing people will wrap their heads. And now more and more, doesn't matter where you go, if you see someone dressed in white, there's that recognition of, that's a Kundalini person. And so that's coming into it. And then I personally see a lot of people who've been practicing vinyasa for years and years and years, and they've done that. They've created the stability and an opening of pranic channels that you can through Hatha yoga. But then they get a Kundalini class, and it's their heads blown off in the best way. And they're like, wow.
You said in class today, you said no passing out aloud.
I think also you see a lot of people from big cities exposed to Kundalini yoga, New York, LA, and there's a tipping point that ultimately gets reached where you have a group of people that are highly educated, highly, they're engaged in life, radiant, I would say, people. Maybe you see them in film, maybe you see them as writers, maybe you see them as some form of creator. They're creatives. And they're involved in Kundalini yoga. And it seeps out to people's consciousness like, wow, those people are doing Kundalini. Maybe I should give that a second look. You know, it's sort of, like he has said, it's hit the mode a little bit. Like people are in the mode of this kind of thing, which used to be maybe off-putting to people. White clothing or wrapping your head as we do in Kundalini yoga, it's not so threatening anymore. I also want to say that as an antithesis to the political division that we all feel and the division in general that we feel in the United States, this antithesis is almost like on a subconscious level we're saying, well, we're willing to go to any level to try to bring balance back to what's going on here. And while that might have seemed insane or a desperate measure before, it's a little bit closer to like, wow, there's something there. Maybe we could dig into that. That might right the ship a little bit.
That's interesting. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. Well, it's beautiful. I'm really attracted to, when I was sitting, this morning, Kia, in your class, and knowing that you have such a rich background in other forms of yoga and who knows what else I'm still learning about you. But that's very attractive to me and for both of you, that it's the tapestry in which you're pulling from is not very narrow, it's very broad. Yeah. And yet you both have clearly a great depth that comes from a certain level of like concentration, a focus in a single way. And even when I wanted to start doing these podcasts, the main kind of theme was I want to speak to people who have or who are in the process of concentrating their life force in a single direction, and then hearing and learning about what comes out of that. Like, for instance, Tommy, you with recovery. Of course, you do so much more than just recovery, but that has been, this is my perception, that has been the one kind of thing that you've done, and my experience is it opens up all other things. So it's that one angle it's a science, as we say, in Kundalini Yoga, of science of angles and triangles. You've taken that one angle in, and that allows you to penetrate into the teachings, and the entire spectrum of the teachings are inside of that. And when I was sitting actually in both of your classes, which I was happy to be able to do, my sense was that you've both been able to do that very beautifully, concentrated and yet relaxed, broad yet focused. And I think that's kind of rare, and also essential, right, for the teachings of, in this case, it could be anything, but in this case, Kundalini Yoga, to be transmitted in a way that doesn't come across rigid or uptight, which it often does, or too dogmatic, and we certainly didn't get into this stuff for more dogma. I know a lot of us, at least myself, I had a spoonful of that plenty of times as a young person. I didn't get into yoga to have more dogma. I got into it to, transcend that.
Yeah.
So I love that from both of you. It's beautiful.
Thank you. Well, I want to comment on that.
Yeah,
I've learned so much from Kia. When it comes to Kundalini Yoga and Hatha Yoga, and Kia perhaps will talk about Tantra and that very ancient and very rich lineage. And I don't want to talk about it because I want Kia to talk about it more in detail, but I'll just simply say that my perspective on yoga, on Kundalini yoga, on Tantra, on any form of yoga has been broadened by the inclusion of that. And so there's that piece, which I'm grateful to Kia for. Also, the recovery piece for me is I grew in recovery, in discovery, in healing, because of a Kundalini yoga teacher who helped me at a key moment in my life to transcend what had been a very painful plateau, as we spoke about earlier. And that transcendence opened a door to a body of work for people in recovery who could embrace these same tools and these same practices, philosophies, and approaches to life that for them too could open a door to the next step. So it's always about, for me, it's always been about a great teacher. Someone has been there for me at every pivot in my life, really, where someone stepped up where I was stuck, where I was in pain, where I didn't know the next move. Somebody came. Now, I remained open to teachings, and that's the only thing I could claim. But the rest of it came from others who had been there and who had been able to do some extraordinary things before me. Right? So we all, any of us have that story, I think, where we're standing on the shoulders of giants. They were giants for us. Without them, how could we possibly be here now? So those are the blessings of. That's the upshot of openness and humility, is that it leads hopefully to a teacher's door, and then you can really go somewhere in this life.
I've been blessed that I walked into the room of Guru Singh, basically, and there I found somebody who holds a mystical presence. Yeah. He holds a vibratory frequency from his teacher and from his life that was so attractive to me. And I'd been doing Ashtanga and Hatha Yoga up until that point. That was what I knew. But there was the presence of the whole container within the teachings that Guru Singh was sharing. I never met Yogi Bhajan, but I had Guru Singh as my inspiration. And I dug a deep well for at least 10 years, just really into Kundalini Yoga. I wanted to understand it at the deepest level that I could. And I came from a very gross understanding without much sensitivity. I dissociated a lot from my body in my teenage and 20s, early 20s. So it took me a long time to reclaim that and understand how the Kriyas were working. And once I started to manifest that different level of understanding and sensitivity to where each practice was taking me, then I started to look outside and see what other Kundalini lineages were teaching. Because a lot of what I was being taught in Kundalini, I was taught by Yogi Bhajan, was challenging to me to accept. Because I came from a somewhat cynical place. And so there was a lot of surrender and faith necessary for me, so a lot of edges that I met along the 10-year deep dive. And then when I came out the other side, what was incredible was that how much of confirmation. I studied in 2 other lineage of Kundalini, the Bihar school and also the Himalayan tradition by Swami Rama. He and Yogi Bhajan were great friends.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And it's corroborated every step of the way. I then have spoken to people in India who have talked to me about Yogi Bhajan about the Sikh gurus and the importance of them, the saintliness, if you like, of each and every one of them, what they held. So I think for me to come to the more empowered place of the seat of the teacher, I personally needed this corroboration. And I needed to broaden out, because I've always felt that if yoga truly is to unite and to create an integrated state of being, then we can't really be thinking of any of it as separate. So Hatha is not separate from Kundalini. It's not separate from Tantra. It's this Western idea that we want to separate things. And then coming from India with the specific lineages that, evolved over time. But what I see, the place that we can all facilitate right now is the evolutionary potential of all of these practices. That if we can see beyond separating, of course, stay true to the authenticity and the correctness of the teachings, but then to broaden our perspective to be all-inclusive and understanding that all of these practices are ultimately directing us to this integrated state of being. So that's kind of where I've arrived at through all of this. And what the essence of deep stillness that I wasn't able to find in the Kundalini tradition, because I was leaning into more activating practices, I've been able to find, for example, in the internal japa meditations within the Swami Rama lineage, that then enabled me to come back into the Kundalini tradition and find the stillness. So I think there's so much there for all of us if we can be flexible in ourselves and go where we feel we need to go in the moment, and then see how it all comes back full circle.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. Right, because it's not dilute in that way. Because sometimes it does, it's that it becomes like a window shopping, where this is something very different than window shopping. This is deep exploration.
Yeah.
And an extraction of gems and polishing them, and then and being clear, intuitive in yourself.
Yeah.
Is that you don't need anyone to tell you.
Yeah.
That you're able to take what you've found, and you're using your intuitive mind and your heart.
Yes.
To know what you're here to do.
Yeah.
And to continue to uncover that. Back to what you were saying, is maintaining this sense of mystery and wonder. I was sitting in Kia's class this morning, and I was just watching. I was in the very back because it was so packed you couldn't get in. I got there late, and there's no seats left, And I was sitting there.
I saw you in the back.
I was watching these people, and they're so into it, the students.
Yeah. And
just thinking about how wonderful it is when you can just be in a class with a teacher and in this sense not be skeptical. Yeah, of course, I'm sure there's skeptical people in there, and there's value, as you were saying, to the skeptical mind too, because the discerning mind.
Discerning mind, exactly. That's, yeah.
But then that can also get in the way, and to be able to pivot to both of them at the moments that when they're needed, negative mind, positive mind, all that kind of stuff. But how valuable is it to sit with a teacher and to fully trust them? Yeah. And to fully trust them to take you on a journey. Yeah. And that's where the skeptical mind could get in the way. Yeah. The sense to never have that, where you fully trust. But also, how much of a responsibility is it for teachers? These people fully trust.
Guru Prem, my teacher, he said, the longer you stay on this path, and the more you hold the seat of the teacher, the more you'll take with you if you fall from grace.
What does that mean?
It means that you have to hold yourself to the behavior of a teacher. And that, you could just take an example of Recovery 2.0. Imagine if, God forbid, I started to use drugs.
Right.
I hid it from people for a while. Nobody knew.
Right.
There I was on the teacher's bench, hypocritically speaking to people from a place of someone who's supposed to be multiple decades sober. Somebody finally finds out, and what it does is it tears down everything that's been accomplished.
Right.
It doesn't ultimately have to do with me. I was just a front man for the teachings. But now in my human frailty, people can then say, I knew it. I knew it couldn't be real. I knew it wasn't true. I knew the teachings didn't hold up. Someone who worked these teachings that hard, that committed, and look what happened to him.
He was still human.
And you know, it brings an interesting conversation because none of us are perfect. And I think what students want, and especially sometimes need at a certain level of development, is they really look to their teacher and they project perfection onto them. Yeah. And I found some of the best teachers were the ones who made themselves known to their students as human. And don't put your faith in me as if I'm a perfect being. In my divine state, I'm a perfect being, my soul, the divinity within me. But as a human being, I'm subject to all of the things that human beings are subject to.
Sure.
You could put your faith in me in terms of my practice. Even there, you have to say, well, you're a human being. And you've made wonderful progress along the way, but, there's not perfection in this human form. That's what we've seen time and time again, as people have made terrible mistakes that have brought down empires around them.
Have you guys watched Wild Wild Country yet?
Yes.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
I loved it so much.
Oh my God.
I was just even seeing Osho, is clearly some magnetism and beautiful, we don't have to get into that right now, but just like he's got a human body too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I love that film so much, that series, because it's for the filmmakers, I thought did a superb job because it forced you to draw your own conclusions, or to even attempt to draw your own conclusions. If you could come up with any, it's like you feel for the simple, townspeople of Oregon. You feel for him, you feel for all the different sides at different times. You fall in love with this person and that's a beautiful person, but there's another beautiful person on the other side, and they're all trying to figure it out.
But they left out his teachings.
They did do that.
And so a person who has no familiarity with him or his teachings, would think about him differently than somebody who really had delved into some of the beautiful wisdom of his teachings.
Yeah, well, I hadn't thought of it from a perspective, because I'm a perspective of someone who has some, I have, and I keep it actually near my altar, his, The True Name.
The True Name, my favorite
his
too.
book on Japji, or his teachings that were put into a book on Japji. And so my first impressions are really important, aren't they? It's like my first impressions of him were very positive. And,
it's an interesting conversation, though, isn't it? Especially for me, being a woman and with the whole #MeToo.
Yes.
And then the fall from grace of so many of the incredible male spiritual teachers.
Right.
And the challenge that brings to so many to integrate that and still be able to, for example, follow those teachings. If the male teacher has, even if they're just rumors, but there's usually, if there's rumors, there's something under it. And pretty much you can look across the span of those incredible male Indian spiritual teachers who came across in the late 60s, 70s, and you can see these discrepancies in behavior.
Sure.
And it's just been interesting to start to figure out what to learn from that. And I know for myself, the place I came to is that we have such a tendency to project perfection onto people, as Tommy was saying. And we want there to be the living saint, and that their behavior is impeccable.
Yeah.
And but what came to me lately, because I had a whole string of emails from students asking me about this, was the Yogi Bhajan's, one of his 5 sutras, understand through compassion, or you'll misunderstand the times. That idea of having compassion for the humanity of us all, and that it's not perfection that we're really looking for, but it is that recognition of compassion, or accessing compassion for the human condition. So I don't know what you guys think about that, but that's kind of what's been coming to mind for me anyway.
Thank you, Kia. I think I'm thinking about the concept of people holding on to a positionality. For example, some people might say, some people might be against the concept of guru, because they feel that to have a guru is to worship a human being. And in the West in particular, we were challenged by that idea of placing one human above another. And so that person who has that positionality, for example, sees Wild Wild Country, the series about Osho.
Right.
And what they've just been given is an unbelievable bolster to their argument. You see?
Yeah.
This is how it is. I knew that's how it was. And so where the teaching is in the humanity of these teachers, of these saints who have fallen from grace, or fallen out of the idea of perfection in the minds of those who held them as perfect.
What was projected onto them, or perhaps what they claimed about themselves, not speaking about anyone in particular.
Yes. And so you have this teaching right in front of our face, which is the most important teaching, which is move beyond the positionality. Move beyond any positionality. You can find an argument against or for anything. You want to eat meat, you'll find the arguments of why you have to eat meat.
Right.
You want to be a vegan, you'll find the arguments of why you have to be a vegan.
Right.
And everything in between. You want to practice Kundalini yoga, you'll talk to some Kundalini yogis. You want to practice this kind of yoga, you're against yoga altogether, speak to some religious people who feel yoga is against their religion.
Right. You want to find a fraud, you'll find what you're looking for.
You'll find what you're looking for. So the teaching is begin to move beyond position altogether. And what that looks like is, I would describe it, this is not my teaching. This comes from our teacher Anand in India. The minute a Christian, a Jewish person, a Muslim person, a Sikh person, a Buddhist person, the minute any of those people actually touch the truth, the designation of their religious entity is gone. Once you've touched the truth as a Christian, you are no longer a Christian.
Right.
The designation of Christian no longer applies when you have touched the truth. Truth was there before the designation of Christian was there. It trumps everything else.
Right.
So move beyond positionality. Move beyond this attachment to my way, this way is the way, and I want to find a way to prove it's the way. Rather, be in this more open space where there are many ways.
Yeah, because it's kind of miserable, really, to be in that space of where I feel like I need to prove my point. It really kind of sucks in retrospect, I think we've all been there.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, it takes a lot of energy.
No
you could
fun
be
at
chilling, you could be having fun, you could be happy, you could be relaxed, you could be cool with other folks. It's way more cool, way more easier life to live, more blissful, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's just like you start getting blissful. I met Anand when I was in Rishikesh.
Yes.
My son and I went to India, And actually, because a man that whom I love a lot, he lives in the Nevada City area. His name is Drupada, and he's a brilliant Jyotish.
You know
Drupada? Okay, great. And so he sent me to the gem shop there, and that was owned by Anand's father, right?
Uh-huh.
And so Anand was in there when I went, and I sat and talked with him for a little while. But I was going to say, because you were talking about, the difference, context is so important. And I used to, I don't know where I got that from at one point. I heard someone, context is more important than the content. And that stayed with me forever. And some things stay with you a little, and then, they fade away. That one just keeps getting stronger and stronger for me. It's not the content of what you're doing, it's the context of how you're doing it. You could have taught that same exact class, but it was your context of where you come from as a person and your experience that then envelops it. That makes it, when you're talking about samana vayu, that, she really, there's an experience behind that where she's able to contextualize it in a way that then it transmits. So then it comes through. Anyhow, I went on that trip to India with Siddhi Amrit, my son. He was 10 at the time. And when we got back, a friend of mine asked me, she said, "What do you think he learned?" And just kind of spontaneously out of my head, I said, he learned how to bow. And because when you're over there in India, it's like, that's what everybody does all the time.
Yeah.
It's not the same, it's a different context than it is. They'll bow to other people. They'll bow to statues. I grew up Jewish. And so you don't worship, what is it? Idols, yeah. But that's not worshiping idols. That's a different thing altogether, The historical context of the Ten Commandments, if you don't understand the historical context, the Ten Commandments don't really work, in my opinion. But if you get the context, that's not worship. You take your head below your heart, and you make your heart supreme. And you make yourself, I'm going to try to be innocent or empty or whatever semantic you want to use, humble enough, do my best to be an instrument, to not know so much, to be more of not knowing, to be more in the mystery of it. That's why I bow my head, and there's something else bigger going on here than I can comprehend. So I'm going to put my head to the earth. And I don't think he learned anything intellectually. It was just being that, you guys spend a lot of time over there. It just happens. It's like osmosis.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to go off of something that you said.
Yeah, I'm watching the time for you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
The thing that you said right there about bowing reminds me of these relatively esoteric, less known perspectives on Jesus and his teaching. For example, the Sermon on the Mount, which is one of his most famous sermons ever.
Yeah,
and in there he delivers the 12 Beatitudes, and one of the Beatitudes is the meek shall inherit the earth.
Aren't you a Jew too?
I am a Jew.
Us Jews up here talking about Jesus.
Sure.
What's happened?
Well, Jesus was Jewish. let's not forget. Jesus himself was Jewish. And well, this is exactly the point.
Yeah.
Is let's not have any particular positionality. Let's explore.
Right.
And we're finding the truth in all these traditions. It mirrors every one tradition seems to mirror the other. The truths that show up in Eastern philosophies, they show up in Western philosophy too.
Of course.
In this particular sermon, though, the meek shall inherit the earth. We, in our day and age, that's a confusing statement.
Right.
Because the word meek for us is like small or weak.
Yeah, or poor.
Or poor.
Yeah.
And that's got to bring up some confusion for modern day Christians as they sort of ponder that statement. As we put it in the context of the day that Jesus lived, we come to understand that meek actually just meant open mind, open heart.
Right.
And that earth, you shall inherit the earth. Well, what's that? And the earth was actually teaching, spiritual teaching. So all Jesus really was saying was, if you keep an open mind and an open heart, you will be able to hear the teaching. You will receive the teaching. No one else will. Unless you keep that meekness, which just simply meant that open mind, empty head, open heart, beginner's mind. And this is, by the way, this is reflected across every tradition that we know. If you're a full cup, nothing can come in. So Jesus was saying, well, if you really want the teaching, then just keep an open mind. Don't feel like you know it all. Be open to the next thing that comes. And from that perspective, that becomes a very, very profound and relevant teaching for any age.
We're going to take a quick break from our conversation to talk about the Life Force Academy, the ultimate home Kundalini yoga experience. The Life Force Academy was originally born out of the simple realization that the number one challenge that most people have with yoga and meditation practice also happens to be the number one most important thing in yoga and meditation practice. And that's a bad combination when your most challenging thing is also the most important thing. And that thing is consistency in yoga practice, meditation practice. You can go to one Kundalini yoga class, for instance, and you can get lifted, you can get energized, you can feel amazing. It's an incredible experience. But the deeper experiences, the even more incredible experiences come when you have a good, consistent practice day in and day out, even if it's for a short amount of time. That's why we created the Life Force Academy, and that's what it was designed for originally. We have now members in over 60 countries around the world. We have a thriving, awesome community. You can use our power practices anytime you need a little boost or upliftment. You can go in and use a power practice, and whether you only have 5 minutes or you have a half hour, there's something for every situation. If you want to do a good set to wake up in the morning, go to that power practice. If you want to have a deep, restful sleep before bed, go to that power practice. If you want to stimulate your immune system at the first sign of a cold or during a season change, use that power practice. If you're feeling overwhelmed, use the power practices to alleviate nervous energies, and so forth and so on. You can use our 40-day challenges if you want to create a major positive shift in your life. In terms of sheer transformative force, there's probably nothing more powerful in our academy than the 40-day challenge. But you can also use our full yoga class series. We have many, many series for many, many different topics, whether it's deathlessness, whether it's prosperity, whether it's the opening of the heart, the heroic heart series. These are full yoga classes where not only are you going to do the powerful Kundalini yoga practices, the really blissful meditations, but you're going to go deep into the teachings, and that's what keeps you going when your mind's connected to the deeper reasons we're doing all of this stuff. It keeps you motivated, keeps you inspired. So all of that is part of the Life Force Academy and much more. And as a listener of this podcast, you can get a $1 trial, a 14-day trial for just $1 if you go to lifeforce.yoga. Just type that into your browser, just as it sounds, lifeforce.yoga. And you can get a 14-day trial for just $1. And then if you love it, when you get in there and you experience it, after your 14-day trial, it's just $25 per month, which is, less than 2 yoga classes at a local yoga studio. It's a really great deal for what you're getting inside of there. And of course, if you find out it's not for you, then you can cancel anytime. Super easy. You can do it from anywhere in the world. Doesn't matter, what your political persuasions are, what your religion is, and it has nothing to do with that. It's about people, human beings who want to live happy, with a healthy body, clear mind, open heart, sense of purpose. Life Force Academy, if you have a mind, you have a mission. Go to lifeforce.yoga to begin your 14-day trial. Now back to my conversation with Tommy and Kia. Do you find yourself, having been doing yoga and all these practices for so long, do you find yourself, let me ask it slightly differently, because I find myself very attracted, and I don't know if this is the right semantic, I'll use it anyway, almost like envious of beginners, because there's such an innocence, and such a openness, like you're saying, to to just doing it, relatively for the first time, and knowing how valuable that beginner's mind is, to not have these like gripped mental channels that doesn't allow the prana to flow. What do y'all do to keep a beginner's mind?
Wow, what a great question. What that says to me is, though, that, which I know about you anyway, because it's what I hear on the grapevine, but you are an amazing teacher for those people, because you are connecting and relating to that in them. For me, it's my seated japa meditation practice. It's so humbling that every day I feel like I'm a beginner. And recently I hit something that was extraordinary. And what happened was there was a little stretch afterwards where I took meditation into action, but I wasn't sitting on the cushion anymore. It was so extraordinary that I thought that I couldn't. It was like, do I go there again? And when I do sit, it's inevitably because the mind wants to replay yesterday. We're chasing that pleasure of yesterday. And so as soon as we start to replay yesterday, we lose the present moment and we lose our access point into whatever that space was that we accessed. And so for me, there's a lot of humbleness that comes along the daily journey of just being like, wow, there's my mind. Oh, the wind's been whipping up here in Joshua Tree. My mind has been like an insane asylum.
The vata.
And my emotions have been absolutely stir crazy. And even if I know better, which I did yesterday on some, call with a institution about, something very practical, I knew better than to get irritated and angry with them. I saw myself do it. I was like, really, Kia, you're going to go there? And that's, to me, is just, it's so humbling. Mm-hmm. Like, wow, I knew better. I know better. I saw better. But I still followed that samskara, that vasana that was so deep that in the moment it just felt, in some weird way, sickly joyful to behave inappropriately.
Like an addiction. Yeah.
Right? And then that just reminds me of, I'm just a beginner at all this.
Yeah.
Just a beginner. And that's humbling.
Yeah. Beautifully said.
I would just share that I spiritually grew up to a great extent in 12-step programs.
Right.
And in those rooms, in that perspective, you really are trained to look for the newcomer and to help them. That your success on the path requires that. And eventually, if you stay sober long enough and you stay on that path long enough and you still love it, as I do, you reach a point where you know that your life is not yours, that you're being used. And I mean that in the best way. Absolutely being used to serve. Not everybody, only the ones who ask. But definitely whenever they show up. When someone walks into a room where I'm teaching Kundalini yoga, I'm like, they don't understand that they're feeding me. Mm-hmm. And that I get to provide whatever I could possibly provide for that person at that moment in their development. And yet it has nothing to do with me. Just like when I sat down and wrote my book, it had nothing to do with my book. It had nothing to do with me. And those words went out on a page, and I read the book now and I don't even recognize that I had written it.
Sure.
Half of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that gift of knowing that there's a steady supply of newcomers, that's an incredible thing, a necessary thing for me to have success on this path. And I never am taking my recovery or my discovery or my path or any of it for granted based on what I've seen go on around me. It's just too painful.
Wow. That's great. All right. Yeah, go
there's
ahead.
so
Kim.
much in the 12-step programs.
I'm
that's
learning that,
So
yeah.
incredibly supportive.
I come across so many inspiring people that have leaned so heavily on the 12-step.
There's a what I've experienced through Tommy and through the people that I come in contact with in recovery is what's so exciting is that the radical self-honesty. That again, it's easy to have all this spiritual lingo and to be in the illusion of living a spiritual life. But if you're not being radically self-honest, then you are just deluding yourself in with cleverer language than you had before.
Right, which is kind of where we started with this. You get that facade going on, and then you can stabilize that facade to where I don't even realize I have a facade.
That's right.
You know, and then the language becomes, and the tonality and how the language is said becomes cemented almost. You know, it's not truly cemented, but seemingly to where it's like Satnamji, you know, and but it's just on autopilot, you know.
Yeah. That autopilot is a form of denial, which you could break down into an acronym that it's don't even know I'm lying.
That's great. Is that a 12-step thing?
That actually is a Nikki Myers thing.
Nikki Myers,
She's a great teacher, yoga teacher and recovery expert. Don't even know I'm lying.
Denial. That's good.
All I would add to kind of complete that is we can have this illusion that enlightenment, that's where we're headed. If I just work hard enough, if I just do enough kriyas, if I get up early enough, then I'll reach that enlightenment. And what I've really experienced is that we all have that. We all have that. We all have. Every single person has those moments of complete lucidity and connection and understanding. So the self-realization is actually not the hard part, but the self-actualization. Okay, now I know that. How am I putting that into practice in every moment of my day? Like that's the hard part, because that's when we come up against all of our patterns. And it's so easy to go with the old pattern. And it's just hard to face your resistance.
Absolutely. That's well, that's the thing that is the liberating part, though, because when you're being really self-honest, you start to feel good about yourself. I think my experience is when you really embrace even the parts of yourself you don't like, you know, then you really start to love. You find yourself loving yourself, you know, and then you find yourself attracted to yourself. I think that's what makes you attractive to other folks, you know. You're just you have that type of confidence where it's like, I'm attracted to myself, including my neuroses, you know, all of it together. You know, I'm not discarding any part. You know, work in progress.
Love that.
That integration is really a key part, I think, of the yogic process. Union, the movement towards a union. And I think it mirrors that path of recovery and discovery as well. That I know that we get into trouble if we start to deny any part of ourself or start to hate any part of ourself. And the real healing comes when we start to integrate it all. Rumi did an incredible poem called The Guest House. You know, basically saying, you know, whatever shows up at your door, invite them all in. Invite them all in, all parts of you. And that's always been a profound, at first, very, very difficult concept to understand. How can I like the parts of myself that I simply don't like?
There's so much paradox, isn't there? You got to meditate. Because there's too much paradox in this path of life. If you're not meditating, it's like, no, it doesn't make sense. You know, but you start meditating, it's like, oh,
yeah,
I can love. I can do all this stuff. Starts to make it makes perfect sense. You know. Yeah. What's a great book you've read recently, or a favorite book?
Yeah, I just read favorite book. God,
or great book.
We'll get into trouble there.
Yeah.
Gosh, well, there's a book called Habit.
I know.
I'm forgetting the author's name. It's terrible. And I read it, and it really reframed. And actually, he speaks a lot about 12-step work in that book, which I didn't know when I began it. But he reframed for me the process of a stressor that you feel, a routine that you go through, to bring about a desired outcome. And that the cue, the stressor, and the outcome will remain the same throughout your life. For a person in active addiction, the stress is the stress. The outcome is relaxation from the stress. And as a person in recovery, it will be the same. The thing that changes, the one thing that changes, is the routine. You adopt a different routine to bring about the same outcome. And that has helped me to understand part of why I have fallen so head over heels in love with yoga and Kundalini yoga.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
The new routine, the sadhana practice, the lifestyle choices, those new routines bring about the outcome I was always searching for. I just was using very destructive methods.
Right.
You know, I paid some prices along the way. But now, having had the upgrade, there's really no desire or need to go back.
Right. So, but you had to replace it with something, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's good to read a book where they
explain what you knew.
Explain what you just did.
Yeah, right. There you go, even better.
In a way that you didn't even understand. Oh, that's what I just did.
Yeah.
That's why that works.
You got a good recent book, Kia?
You know, it's not recent because I've been carrying it around in my bag, and it's all dog-eared for 2 years now, since I began my full immersion and deep love affair with Japji. And it's the book that you named, The True Name by Osho. I just can't get enough of the wisdom in that book.
Yeah, that's one of those books I have to read a paragraph at a time.
Yeah.
And it's like,
okay. Yeah, exactly.
It's not it's hard to get through the whole thing. And, you know.
And why? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why I've been carrying it dog-eared around. It's for 2 years.
Right. I totally understand that. I know exactly why. Yeah. You're not going to finish it in a month or in a few weeks. That's really cool. It's a great book. Well, this was great. Thank you so much.
So nice.
Thank you, Jaidev.
If if it works out, if I'm lucky enough, then I'd love to take the deep dive one-on-one with each of you at some point and hear more about the life path that got you here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this work. Grateful to you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I'm lucky to be doing it. Happy to be doing it.
Yeah, it's a true blessing of Yogi Bhajan, isn't it? That the teachings are so clear and they're so whole that we have the fortune to simply share them.
I know. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Satnam.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. That was the conversation with Tommy and Kia. I love them. I really enjoyed that episode and talking with them and Joshua Tree, and I know we're going to be doing more with both Tommy and Kia. At some point we'll have to take the deep dive with each one of their life stories individually. I know they have a really, really unique, really amazing story, so we will definitely at some point do episodes with each one of them individually and do that deep dive. But that was it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast and please give us a rating or a review. We would really appreciate that. It would help us out a lot. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure to go to Tommy Rosen's website and go to Recovery 2.0. Go to Kia Miller's website, check out the trainings that she does. They're both amazing people. If you can meet them in person, go to one of their events. You will be really happy that you did. Thanks for listening, everyone. New episodes coming out really soon.